With about 2 weeks left until BlizzCon 2023, expectations for the future of Classic WoW have never been higher, and there are many reasons for that. We're getting towards the end of the first trio of games in Vanilla, TBC, and Wrath of the Lich King. Many people say that those three were the classic games in the first place, and that Cataclysm and beyond changes things too much. On the other hand, we have seen tons of players choosing to go back to where it all began and restarting anew on vanilla realms. And we also know Blizzard are planning another seasonal realm too, or at least that's the last we heard about it some time ago. But for many, this crossroads of different options does feel like the time to do something entirely new. Something to change the course of World of Warcraft and reinvigorate this legendary game. What else could I be talking about other than Classic Plus? Classic Plus itself has been an idea which has floated around the community for just about as long as Classic WoW itself has been a thing. Overall, the idea is that instead of Blizzard taking the game in a vertical direction with expansions, an increased level cap, and older content being made largely irrelevant, instead they progress more horizontally. They add new zones, different ways to acquire items, and keep the game in the spirit of how it is at level 60, with everything that entails. But that is where things get tricky. What exactly is it that makes people go back to Classic? What is it that keeps the game in the spirit of Classic? You can ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers, and you can be sure if Blizzard were to do anything to Classic, they would be scrutinized heavily by scores of 20-year veteran players. It wouldn't be an easy job, that's for sure. You see, this is another key difference between Classic Plus to, say, seasonal servers. If Blizzard want to do some wacky, fun server type thing on seasonal, sure, why not, go for it. Because it's seasonal. There will be an end date where all those characters will be shipped off to Era, but Classic Plus should be something which lasts. It wouldn't be a year-long server, it would be, well, another version of World of Warcraft entirely. One where maybe we don't cross the Dark Portal, we don't learn flying, we don't have transmog, or many of the countless other updates that have been made over the years. And barriers to Classic Plus aside, and I know there are some pretty big ones such as development, expenses, commitment, and so on, today I wanted to talk about what kind of features I think would fit into a Classic Plus experience. Of course, I'm expecting different opinions on a lot of these, but I guess these are some of the baseline things that I would hope to see from such a server. So with all that said, let's get into it. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Dungeon Hunter 6. Dungeon Hunter 6 is a free-to-play mobile ARPG with a focus on varied PvE and PvP gameplay, as well as a unique hero collection system. In Dungeon Hunter 6, not only do you defeat bosses, but you have the ability to control them as part of your fighting force. Whether they're serving as transport for your group or on the battlefield, each boss has different uses. There are over 100 bosses to dominate, so combining different ones together will provide nearly endless combinations in combat. Dungeon Hunter 6 comes with many creative gameplay features too, such as doing more than just simple combat missions. One of them, for example, has you infiltrating an enemy fortress as part of a cat stealth mission. You can also heavily customize mounts within the game to create something tailored to you. Dungeon Hunter 6 provides top-tier graphics performance even when there is a lot happening on the screen to ensure the best visuals and smoothest combat on mobile devices. And with consistent updates and promotions being added, there is always something new in the game. You can download Dungeon Hunter 6 for free and get started today by scanning the QR code on screen now. You will also get a special starter pack worth $50, including 10 summoning scrolls, 1 SSR Lieutenant Demonic Wolf, and 1 accessory pack. You can then use your game account to enter the Lucky Spin event now to win more prizes, including an iPhone 15 Pro Max, PS5s, and more. Check the description for details. Many thanks to Dungeon Hunter 6 for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. First up is new content. It's a total given, of course, but Classic Plus would need active development on new areas, monsters, quests, NPCs, and so on to be added into the game. There are both existing assets that could be relied upon, as well as older assets which are used infrequently, such as the Bloodsail pirates, or maybe even perhaps the older player character models. Vanilla is, and was, truly an expansive world, and Blizzard planned more content than they could have possibly fit into it in the time frame they wanted to execute it all in. As such, there are many loose ends into zones, or parts of the game which are straight up unfinished. Here's a few known locations in the game that could be built upon in patch releases. We have Grimbatol, Uldum, Timbermore Hold, Deadwind Pass, Mount Hyjal, the Emerald Dream, why not the Dwarven Airfield or farm above Dunmurra, the old housing portal in Stormwind, the empty zone east of the Burning Steppes, which became the Twilight Highlands, even Ashara perhaps, that could use a bit more content, and many, many more. In fact, in early versions of World of Warcraft, they planned for the Black Temple to be a dungeon, and for the level cap to be 70. The Burning Crusade and Wrath both have a bunch of ideas which just didn't make it into vanilla in time. Either way, there is a good springboard of familiar content to use here that could be built upon the existing world in a way which would make sense. New content would of course involve raids and dungeons, which again, we're not short on. Ones that were added in later expansions include Mount Hyjal, Karazhan, Grimbatol, and of course all the content that was put into the Twilight Highlands or Uldum in Cataclysm. Then again, Gilneas could be a new dungeon too. What about taking on the leadership of the Scarlet Crusade, or cleansing Timbermore Hold of corruption? There are really so many great options here, but even with all these possibilities for new content, you have to keep in mind that this newer content cannot totally replace everything that came before it and make it all feel irrelevant. Whether older raids can contain class books to upgrade abilities, special trinkets, items with unique proc effects, they're part of quest chains, whatever it be, there needs to be some balance between newer content and keeping the old stuff feeling worthwhile. Whatever happens, the world as a whole needs to feel as though there is meaning to it, be that for a player who's just starting their journey, all the way to those at level cap. Speaking of level cap, I feel as though that's one thing which can't change, or newer items will begin to outscale the old ones just by virtue of having more stats. This doesn't mean you can't have new quests at endgame though, whether they're for profession items, attunements, class quests, all those kind of things. It also kind of goes without saying, but no flying. I'm fine with flying in expansions which have been designed with it in mind, but vanilla was not, so just doesn't really make sense here. Oh, and also, a bunch of profession crafts should be updated to some extent. Seriously, some of the items that exist are so bad it's actually hard to put into words how much you are griefing yourself by making them. One of my favourites to highlight is the Hammer of the Titans. First of all, you need a plan dropped from a boss in Strat Undead, as well as 15 Arcanite bars and Guardian Stones from the elite golems in Ungoro Crater. For all this effort, you get a level 58 blue weapon with average stats and an on-hit chance to stun your target for 3 seconds. I'm just saying, that doesn't seem worth it. And not every item you make through professions has to be absolutely incredible, of course, but a better investment to return ratio would be good on certain pieces. Moving on though, I would like to talk about raiding. So in Season of Mastery, if you remember, Blizzard followed the very common criticism from Classic's 2019 release that raiding was too easy. They removed world buffs and made the content more challenging, and I generally hear positive things about those who stuck around and played it all. Then again, most people aren't going to keep doing something they don't like, so go figure. In TBC, Blizzard did pre-nerf content. In Wrath, they've done pre-nerf content again. And throughout Classic so far, many new raids have been approached with people saying, just wait, this is going to be the challenging one, only for thousands of guilds to have cleared it within the space of a few weeks. I do think this is changing in Icecrown Citadel, by the way, and it will even more in Cataclysm, but essentially people like saying they want hard raids, and then less people tend to do them. There was a serious drop-off in raiders week on week in Ulduar, despite it being heralded as one of the must-do raids of Classic. And if we take a look at raiding in Classic, it's not for the mechanics, the complexity, or progression in general. It's about hitting a boss for a couple of minutes and getting your purples. There is skill involved though, it's just most of it comes before the raid, not during. Classic is about how much can you prepare, how much do you know about the game, how many world buffs did you get, do you have all the consumables, do you need resistance gear, How many tanks do you need? All that kind of stuff. Pretty much everyone gets to clear all the content in vanilla and has a shot at the best loot in the game. The more competitive players will turn to creating their own challenge via speedrunning and optimizing their gameplay through cooldown and consume usage on a boss-by-boss basis. I think should new raiding content ever exist, you want to keep this in mind. Vanilla's endgame does not need to be super difficult, and people will still have a really good time. Next up is definitely one of the most important features in vanilla. They are the lens through which we see the game. I'm of course talking about your class. So I kind of hope that it would go without saying, but warriors can't keep doing about 30 to 40% more DPS than everyone else, whilst also being the best tank. In other words, there's going to have to be class changes and rebalancing with major content patches to change those who are over or underperforming. However, personally, I don't want Blizzard to just add in wholesale full parts of class design from later expansions. And as much as TBC and Wrath have solved many issues that classes had in vanilla, they are kind of doing their own thing and their own experiences. An example I like to use is the enhancement shaman in vanilla. It's got this dual identity where it's fine at tanking lower level dungeons, and then it can either go DPS with a one-hander and a shield, or use a two-hander and fish for those big Wind Fury procs. That is the vanilla enhancement shaman. To me, it is not a dual-wielding melee-only DPS. That is TBC and every expansion since. So would it be possible to amend talents to be able to fit enhancement into a tank if they really wanted to do that? Can changes be made so it's actually somewhat relevant on the DPS meters? Classes would be an area that would take a lot of thought. I reckon it would be really easy to add too much power, and then we go from slow and steady gameplay to suddenly blasting through half a dozen mobs like they're nothing, as you can in Wrath at the moment. All the same, it would be good to see some better overall class representation, particularly the hybrid DPS, so your Boomkins, Elementals, Shadow Priests, all of those guys, they need some help in not going in 1 minute of casting. Non-warrior tanks need improvements. More tanking options is just a good thing for the game in general. No one wants to spend 20 minutes looking for a tank. And many class rotations during endgame could be a bit more diverse too. It's kind of strange, because if I take my main in the Warlock for example, when I'm doing non-raid content I'm using easily over a dozen spells regularly between my damage over time effects, crowd control, demon abilities, and so on. And then I get to raid and it's Apply Curse, Shadow Bolt, and the rest of my toolkit is barely touched. There's simple rotations which are fine, and then there's having literally one button. Things could be spiced up a little bit on the front for many casters. After talking about classes, let's talk about some other choices that you make, your faction and your racials. For me, I don't want to see Alliance Shaman or Horde Paladins in vanilla. If anything, I want to see more things being faction specific, which will make players want to try playing on the other side for a different experience. What about Demon Hunter on Alliance as only Night Elves, or Horde getting Death Knights as undead? At least that will be 2 more tanking classes, right? The differences in faction also make people choose their faction based off how they perform overall, more so than which one just has the better racials, which is what we've really started to see happen now in Wrath. Speaking of racials, there are also a few outliers, notably the ones which improve weapon skills, those being humans with bonuses to swords and maces, and orcs with bonuses to axes. There are other classes with weapon skill racials too, such as dwarves for guns or trolls for thrown weapons, but back then Blizzard didn't appreciate just how much of a benefit weapon skill was going to be for actual melee weapons. There is a reason the majority of the warriors you see in vanilla are orcs or humans, and it's not just a bunch of Garrosh or Varian role players. I've seen suggestions to add weapon skills to other races too to balance things out, but I think that would make you feel as though you're just hoping the next piece of content has a relevant weapon your race can use, or you're gonna feel bad. It would be a situation which would create winners and losers. You could possibly add a new system, quest, or additional training at maximum level to be able to level weapons up to 305 instead of having this be a racial. This would be very powerful to give it to everyone though, so maybe not. All in all, I think the faction differences are a good thing in Classic, and it's a version of the game where you do experience things differently, both through questing and endgame, and keeping the divide in place gives more people thematic reasons to pick one or the other, as well as maybe one day wanting to re-roll to see how the other side experiences endgame content. Finally, gold. It matters in vanilla a lot. Whether it's training your class skills, leveling professions, getting your mount, preparing for raid, you need gold all of the time. Now, without getting into the underground side of acquiring gold, which I'm sure you're all too familiar of and have heard plenty about in Classic, this is still a subject worth talking about. What we've seen happen in TBC and especially Wrath is the power of our characters go up dramatically, allowing much more efficient gold farming. You then combine this with the flat increase of the value of quest rewards and trash drops, and these days, even without farming much, players can sustain their gold on pretty minimal amounts of gameplay. However, whilst vanilla needs you to go out there and farm more, it does suffer in one regard, and that's the fact that the game has very minimal gold sinks to remove currency from circulation. Case in point at the moment is the raiding scene on Classic Era. These servers are a few years old now, and with their recent popularity, they've had tons of players coming back and getting gold one way or another. As for gold sinks, repair costs don't really do that much. Respecing to go and farm gold is kind of just an off-putting prospect when you know you're going to be down 100 gold before you've even started. And there is the one-time cost of your mount, your abilities, and that's kind of it for vanilla gold sinks. I guess that could be another talking point in of itself. Would dual spec be right for vanilla in one way or another? It is more of a recent expansion feature, but it would encourage players to engage with more areas of the game rather than thinking, I'm going to have to farm for at least 2 hours, if not 3 or 4 to break even, so I'm just going to save my gold and log off. One way or another, there is plenty of space to add new gold sinks into the game through new content, but it's important that your gold total does remain a relevant number for the majority of players, as I think that's an important part of what creates character investment in vanilla. There are plenty of other points, be them big or small, which are worth a mention here, but those 5 are some of the larger ones which I wanted to talk about today. Of course, this is a video about Classic Plus, so everyone's going to have different wants out of the game, and that is okay. At the end of the day, should Classic Plus ever happen for real, it won't appeal to everyone purely through the nature of changing aspects of vanilla. But there will always be Classic Era, right? Either way, let me know your thoughts about what I've gone over here today. Would these be a good start to Classic Plus? Would this be taking it too far? Or maybe even not far enough? Let me know below. Fingers crossed for exciting news from Blizzcon. We can always dream. Many people said we were dreaming back in 2019 before Classic, or seasonal servers for hardcore, and I'm just saying, here we are. But as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.